Welcome to Living Well with MS Coffee Break, a part of the Overcoming MS podcast family, made for people with multiple sclerosis interested in making healthy lifestyle choices. Today, you'll meet someone living with MS from our global Overcoming MS community. Our guests will share their personal perspective on the positive and practical lifestyle changes they have made which have helped them lead a fuller life. You can check out our show notes for more information and useful links. You can find these on our website at overcomingms.org/podcast. If you enjoy the show, please spread the word about us on your social media channels. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. So, get your favourite drink ready and let's meet our guest. Welcome to Living Well with MS Coffee Break number 16, where we are pleased to welcome Rick Nelson as our guest. If you haven't already, please consider registering at www.overcomingms.org. This way you can stay up to date on all the latest OMS news, including new programs and digital initiatives. Again, that's www.overcomingms.org, and look for the register button in the upper right corner of your screen. As always, your comments and suggestions are welcome by emailing podcast@overcomingms.org. We hope you enjoy this episode's conversation with Rick, beaming to you straight from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, although actually he told me that he's actually in New Jersey, just over the state border and in the USA. So welcome, Rick.
Oh, thank you, Joe. Happy to be here.
So our audience wants to know a little bit about you and your life. So could you share some background on where you're from, what you do, any snippets of your family or personal life, or anything about you that would give our listeners a sense of who Rick Nelson is?
Oh, wow. Big question. So I come from a blue-collar entrepreneurial family. First in my family to graduate from college. Came out of school, went to work for a big corporation, loved it. Very challenging, very demanding, high stress, but loved it. And after about 12 years, I found myself running a $60 million division of this company in my early 30s, but then decided I could do the same for myself and my team. So when entrepreneurial opportunity came around and get my own business, I jumped at it. And since then, I've led or helped lead 3 different entrepreneurial companies. One of which was a bust, a strikeout, not successful. Learned a lot. One was, I would say, moderately successful. My former partner is still running it. It's making a good living for him and his family. And one was a big home run. And that one, we had a company that we grew from a $100,000 business in year 1 up to $26 million in 5 years. And it was a great journey. Lots of learning, lots of stress. Loved it in many ways, but it took a toll. And the toll was around stress.
Which is, I think, quite common as well, actually, when sort of MS symptoms get going. So how about your experience with MS? Could you provide some context on that and when you were diagnosed and how you initially coped with that?
Yeah, so for me, I'll actually start before then, Jeff, if it's okay. My first experience with MS, I was in middle school, and I had an aunt, my Aunt Mary Jean, my mom's youngest sister I was close to. And she was diagnosed with MS, and this was back in the 60s, probably late 60s, early 70s. And we saw, she did everything that the best medical science had to offer her. But, bit by bit by bit, month by month almost, she declined and ended up passing away at an early age. And literally, from related effects to MS. And that was very hard on our family, obviously on her kids. And so that was something that, we felt and lived through. It was tough. And fast forward a couple of decades later, I was diagnosed with MS. And it was like, oh my gosh, right? This is serious stuff. So, I was, pretty active. I was, running a marathon, did a frequent 10Ks and half marathons once in a while. And my first symptoms were foot drop, where I was, my feet would start to drag. And Then I went around trying to get diagnosed, and I was actually told I didn't have MS by one of the big centers in the Philadelphia area, medical center. And then one day I lost my sense of taste, and it's like yikes. So I went back and did a whole nother round, and this journey was over a couple of years trying to figure out what was going wrong. And finally, I was diagnosed with MS back at the late 2004.
And
So it's been 16 years.
How about OMS? How did you come across OMS, and why did you decide to start following OMS?
Yeah. So for me, I immediately dove into research, Dr. Google, and found initially the work of Roy Schwank. And Roy Schwank, for those who maybe not familiar with it, did literally a 35-year-old study starting back in, I think it was 1948, Jeff, where he followed MS patients over a good number of OMS patients. I'm thinking a couple of hundred patients, MS patients, and tracked their diet. And what he found, he tracked a lot of things, but what he found was those patients who was able to stick to a under 20 grams of saturated fat a day, animal fat, saturated fat, literally didn't progress over that long period of time. And those that were over that did. Their level of disability progressed, and deaths and so forth. It was a long-term study, and that was super convincing to me. So I pretty much immediately went on the Schwank diet, which was low saturated fat. And again, going through the experience with my family and my aunt, it was pretty easy for me to stick to it. It wasn't that tough, even though I love steak and meat and all those things. To me, it was pretty easy. And then a few years later, I came across OMS. And I realized that the work of Dr. George Jelinek, had, really taken new research into effect, and was much more of a complete lifestyle. So I devoured the book, then I reread it, and I read it again, and I became convinced of, the research and also the selfless nature. I mean, there were lots of people trying to sell stuff, including pharma companies and so forth, but I just felt like, this was genuine. The research was convincing to me. So I adapted OMS and have been, with it ever since.
And go on, sorry.
No, what I was going to say, Jeff, is the one part of it I did struggle with a bit, and I still was in, a high stress career and so forth, but I struggled with meditation.
That was actually going to be my question. Is there any parts you struggle with? So.
Yeah.
Have you managed to overcome it?
Yeah, so I ended up going to the retreat in Melbourne. And, I'm coming from the U.S., it's a long plane ride, but I felt like, I'm going to do whatever it takes, So I went to Melbourne, attended the 5-day retreat with, the intention of strengthening myself in, in the meditation aspect. And it worked. I mean, I lived the whole experience. Dr. Jelinek was very present, and there was a meditation instructor by the name of Zig, they called him. I remember his nickname. And Zig made a statement that still rings with me, all these years later. He said, if you have time to eat lunch, you have time to meditate. And you'll be much healthier from the meditation than you will for lunch. And for me, I could stand to lose a pound or two. So for me, that resonates true. And since then, I've had pretty much a daily meditation practice ever since.
I think one of my favorites, it might be Jon Kabat-Zinn, but someone said if you can't find half an hour a day to meditate, then you need to find an hour a day to meditate. Absolutely,
yeah. I love that one too. And I've become an adherent of his, Jon Kabat-Zinn, and he brought a program called MBSR, Meditation-Based Stress Reduction. And I took a 6-week course at a local yoga studio there after I got back. And I'm part of a couple of meditation groups locally, which has really just helped reinforce the practice.
And when did you see positive effects from OMS, on your MS?
I think pretty quickly. I mean, as I said, I was on a low saturated fat diet, So I've really, I feel I've been feeling healthy. I mean, there have been some effects, but for the most part, I've been, able to live a healthy, active lifestyle and contribute,
So you probably started to turn the tide with the swank diet already.
Yeah.
And you've been a very valuable contributor to the OMS community. So, for example, you established the OMS Circle in Philadelphia and serve as its ambassador. Sorry. What's that experience been like?
Um, so, I'm really passionate about helping educate people so that they have a choice. Because in the U.S., if you go to a neurologist and you're diagnosed with MS, in most cases, there's not a conversation around lifestyle, around diet. It's mostly a conversation around pharmaceuticals. So for me, it's been, really important that people be aware and educated about, the importance of lifestyle, through the OMS program, because, for me, it just works.
Yeah,
So
it's so frustrating. It's just
passion.
luck, isn't it, with which neurologist you get. And and it's not just the country you're from. I know that there's several in the US who completely encourage lifestyle, as well as medication. They're not. I don't think I've come across any neurologists who are anti-medication, but there's certainly a few who are very keen on the whole lifestyle message. But then there are others, the more old-fashioned ones, who are literally, these are the drugs you take. I'll see you in 6 months. And that's it.
And I don't blame them, because that's the way they're educated. My nephew just graduated from medical school, and he that's the way he's been educated from the beginning, is looking at illness through that framework. So my experience has been the major institutions tend to be more drug specific, and again, my viewpoint's pretty limited here. And a more open attitude among, some of the more independent ones. But, for me, it's like, what goes to my mind is my Aunt Mary Jean. And if she had been aware of, of what we know through OMS, then, she would have been around to enjoy her grandchildren and contribute to, to her family. So my mind just keeps going back to that. It's kind of a tragedy. I feel like people don't know about it that are diagnosed.
And with coronavirus, which obviously everyone's going through this at the moment, how has that affected having an OMS circle? How have you managed? Because, I mean, presumably you were traditionally, or pre-COVID, if you like, meeting up in person. Have you managed to keep that going through lockdowns and various constraints placed on you?
Yeah, so pre-COVID, we were meeting pretty much monthly. And, we would have dinner at an OMS-friendly restaurant. We did, a chair yoga session, some meditation things. But with that, we were pretty active. I have to say, it's really dropped off for us, since COVID. Zoom just doesn't seem to have the same attraction, I think, for people. And part of that I'll take on myself too, because I would say, in my case, we have definitely rooms for improvement around, responding to COVID for this.
We have to hope, though. I think we're getting there, aren't we? Well, I mean, it depends where you are in the world, of course. I mean, there are, anyone listening from India, it's a very different picture from the States and the UK. But I think, for us, we seem to be turning a corner, certainly with vaccinations and so on. So hopefully, God willing, we'll.
I was vaccinated. I got my second dose 6 weeks ago, so it feels like a superpower.
Yeah, mine's tomorrow, actually. My second dose tomorrow. And on a personal note, do you have any unusual interests or wacky hobbies you could tell us about? What kind of stuff would you do on a weekend, for example?
I don't know if it's in the wacky category or not, but I have embraced mindfulness. So I'm part of, several mindfulness groups, and I brought it into my work also, which I found helpful for both my work and just my health. So that's one. I love to travel. We have a place in Brazil. My wife's Brazilian, so we're, in the northeast part of Brazil on the beach in Salvador. That's been hampered by COVID. They're experiencing a rough time right now with COVID there too. But I don't know if it's wacky or not, but I embrace mindfulness. I do yoga also as part of that. It's a gentle form of yoga called Sarupa. That's helped me as well. I also read. I do try to read a book a month at least, just to keep my brain, growing and expanding.
I think yoga's great. I mean, I know Veronique, who does a lot of stuff for OMS with fitness and so on, but because it encompasses a bit of everything. You've got, in fact, the more you look into yoga, the more OMS compliant it is, because actually they're encouraged to have a vegan lifestyle. They're doing exercise. It's good flexibility. They're encouraged to do mindfulness. And it's like, okay, you seem to be ticking a lot of the boxes, essentially with one activity, but actually it's an activity that has many strands to it. So you're also a successful entrepreneur and management consultant. If you tap into that expertise for a nugget of wisdom that would help people ease into and better adopt the OMS program, what would that advice be?
Yeah, it's, thinking of that, Jeff, for me, it's about, number one, envisioning health. And then it's about believing it and taking action for it, and really developing our habits for me. So I have actually put together a scorecard, a personal scorecard. I keep it next to my shaving kit and, a little printout thing. And every day I check off the boxes. Do I fulfill diet? Am I following the diet, OMS diet? Have I done exercise? Have I done meditation? Have I engaged in a meaningful personal connection outside of business? Because I tend to be a little bit of a workaholic. And did I get enough sleep? And I literally check off those, and I have a little score next to each of them, and they add up to 100 points. And I rate myself every day and every week and bring it forward. And again, I'm not trying to be perfectionistic. For me, if I can stay over 85% of my score there, then, it's been a successful day. But I can start to see trends, because I'll develop personally where, I'll go sideways on sleep, or I'll get over-focused on work and maybe neglect connections, or, I'll skip my exercise, 3 times in a week or whatever it might be. But for me, having that little checklist just kind of brings me on back. And, so there's times when it's, 10 o'clock at night, and I'm thinking, I want to check off the sleep box. So I'll go to bed at 10:30 rather than, 1 o'clock in the morning, which it would be my natural habit. So for me, that little scorecard was a nice tool. And my business clients used it obviously in a very different way. But
and I guess people could personalize it, because I think I might do this. That sounds like a really good idea. But I think I'd add in if I'm drinking enough water, because I find it quite easy. I'm sitting in a garden office, and I can sometimes be here for hours, and then you think, I haven't gone in and drunk any water all morning. Yep. And that would be, whereas actually sleep's not a big problem with me. I tend to get enough sleep. But you could change it, couldn't you? Say, okay, absolutely, these are the things I need to do.
Yeah, like connection isn't really in the OMS program, but I know it's healthy for me, and it's something that I need to focus on, or if I remind myself of. So yeah, it can absolutely be personalized.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to just be OMS, does it? It can be your lifestyle.
Yeah. So for me, the OMS part was diet, exercise, meditation, and I like sun. For me is pretty easy. I'll go out and get sun if it's nice. So I don't need to have that on there, because I'm drawn to that anyway.
Okay, that's excellent advice. So with that, thank you very much for joining us on the Living Well with MS coffee break, Rick Nelson.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Well with MS coffee break. Please check out this episode's show notes at overcomingms.org/podcast. You'll find all sorts of useful links and bonus information there. If you would like to be featured in a future Coffee Break episode or have any suggestions, please email us at podcast@overcomingms.org. You can also subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Living Well with MS Coffee Break is kindly supported by a grant from the Happy Charitable Trust. If you would like to support the Overcoming MS charity and help keep our podcast advertising free, you can donate online at overcomingms.org/donate. Thank you for your support. Living Well with MS Coffee Break is produced by Overcoming MS, the world's leading multiple sclerosis healthy lifestyle charity. We are here to help inform, support and empower everyone affected by MS. To find out more and subscribe to our e-newsletter, please visit our website at overcomingms.org. Thanks again for tuning in and see you next time.